From representatives from Murray Valley, everyone's important, but the wine growers, that's what it's all about, or the grape growers. I now welcome representatives from Murray Valley Winegrowers and the Riverland Grapegrowers Association. I understand that information on parliamentary privilege and the protection of witnesses has been given to you in relation to Senate committees. And for everyone got that? And for the Hansard record, and I'll just go to the front row first, and I'll start from my left. If you could just introduce yourselves and the capacity in which you appear today. When you finish that, then I'm going to ask for opening statements. Mr. Farnsworth.
Yep, Brent Farnsworth. I'm a wine grape grower from the Murray Valley, and also currently sit on the board of the IDC, which is the Industry Development Committee. We distribute the funds that the growers pay in a levy back to Murray Valley to use for projects.
Fantastic. What I will do, gentlemen, yeah, it's all gentlemen, I'll get you to speak into your mics because we've got some issues with the hearing because the air conditioner's being picked up. And for all those out there in the wild yonder that are listening to this on the internet, just so they can get very clear and precise and can hear you.
Thank you.
Mr. Frasca, you want
I'm Stephen Frasca, Winegrape grower in the Murray-Darling as well, and I am Deputy Chair of the Murray Valley Winegrape Committee. So yeah.
Thank you.
Chris Dent, I'm the Chairman of Murray Valley Winegrowers, and I'm also a grape grower from the Swan Hill region.
Thank you.
Paul Dorico, CEO of Murray Valley Winegrowers.
Thanks.
Peter Hill, I'm a wine grape grower, and I'm a committee member of Riverland Winegrape Growers Association.
Great.
My name's Jack Papagiorgio. Lived here for 50 years, and I'm part of Riverland Wine since day one, 21 years ago.
50 years. Are you a local yet?
Well, you've got to ask the locals.
It's a very Canberra thing that we ask. Anyway,
I think 50 years should be.
You think so?
Henry Crawford, I'm a very small grower from Winegrape and on the Riverland Wine Board.
Look, thanks, gentlemen. So I will give you the opportunity to go to an opening statement, and this is your chance to tell us and everyone out there exactly what you want us to hear. Who'd like to start off? Guys, you have to give you a couple of great northerns to get you going. Come on, you're talking to a truck driver, I know. Just fire up.
We'll have an opening statement from Riverland Wine.
Let's go, Henry. For God's sake, mate, give them something to follow.
All right,
For goodness' sake,
thank you, senators, and thank you for coming here to Renmark to visit us. Riverland Wine represents both growers and winemakers in this region. Representing Riverland Wine today is we've got Jack Papagiorgio from Cooltong and Peter Hill from Loxton, and myself, Henry Crawford from Winegrape. Riverland Wine made a submission to the grape and wine sector regulatory analysis, currently being conducted by Dr. Craig Emerson, and this Senate inquiry focuses on the code. We refer the committee to that submission. I think it has been circulated. In that submission, we assert that any code of conduct must cover the supply chain from growers through to retailers. Further, a code of conduct must not distort market signals or slow or prevent supply-demand rebalancing. Riverland Wine supports the implementation of a mandatory code, provided that there is extensive consultation on key terms, as there are risks with a code to growers, and that a similar to a mandatory code be implemented between retailers and winemakers. Payment terms should be mandated to 50%, 30 days month after delivery, and 50% by June 30 in the year of harvest. And we also suggest that grape and wine contracts should be mandated to have a reference to price, either minimum pricing, fixed pricing, or a transparent price discovery mechanism. In recognising the desire, particularly from growers, to have a mandatory code, it can't be overlooked that much of the frustration is price related. At the moment, our industry is oversupplied, wine globally is oversupplied. Compounding this is a decreasing competitiveness of producers of Australian wine in our global markets. It is the commercial realities of grower contracts become too onerous. Wineries may seek to source wine for their products from other sources, including bulk wine, and this has greater risks for growers if they are forced into the bulk wine producing business. So with that, open to questions.
So thanks, Mr. Crawford, and the Murray. I'll spit it out in a minute. The Murray Valley Winegrowers, who'd like to.
I'll open up. So, yeah, Murray Valley Winegrowers, we represent about 270 independent wine grape growers in our region. We only advocate for the independent growers. There are a lot of winery-owned vineyards and businesses in our region as well, but we are just acting on for the independent growers, and they pay a levy, which Brent's already filled you in on how that is distributed. We've obviously been quite involved in the code since inception. Paul is on the code committee. Observer, and another person in our region is now on the code committee as well. We have a mix in our region of wineries who are signed up to the code and a lot who aren't. And obviously we've seen and heard of many stories around good and bad about what has come since then, and obviously all the other inquiries like the ACCC inquiry and what that's done to some winery behaviour. We somewhat sit on the fence in terms of whether it's mandatory or voluntary. We feel that it's a how can I put this, Paul?
Straight from the heart.
Yeah.
Go hard, mate.
It's not delivering everything that we would hope in terms of a code, particularly around price releases and how some wineries are manipulating the market, but also using it as their mechanism to bring the price and the market down to suit their own desires and needs and pricing. So we're certainly the code has delivered some good things around dispute mechanism and brought some wineries into line in terms of introducing a very clear dispute mechanism clause, which is great. So we have seen some good parts about that. But like I say, the biggest issue we've seen is the wineries who are signed up to the code have to release their prices on a certain date, and then all the others sit and wait to see what those prices are and then do their own thing, generally lower than that anyway. So there's a somewhat feeling of a bit of market setting in that process, which certainly wasn't intended when the code came in.
I suppose the other thing I would add is that mandatory code or not, what needs to be fixed is the industry, because if there was a mandatory code in tomorrow, the issues of the industry would still be there and we'd still be having all the problems. If you want earlier pricing announcements, that we do. 5 years ago when prices were good, there was no issues about announcing the prices earlier. We want better payment terms now. Well, again, when things were good, 2020 or thereabouts, you might have been able to get 30 days or maybe a bit quicker when prices were good. But yeah, the code is just a symptom of the disease. The disease is the industry's in the doldrums. It's that simple.
I can continue, I guess, from Riverland's point of view. Yeah, when times are good, you know, we're all working together and it's happy days. But for me, I think if we work hard now when times are bad and we put in place a code to keep us in a good position forever. Now, I know there's never, the sun's going to, you're always going to get some sort of storm in the future for, you know, whether it's a Prime Minister shutting another market or whatever. But if we work together hard now, in tough times, I know we need more markets, but we come up with some rules that we work together with. Like the growers said earlier on, if they get earlier pricing indicators, they can decide whether they mothball or not and save some money. But at the moment, it's all a bit too late. You've grown the crop, well, you might as well continue to grow it and pick the fruit and end up losing money. But I think there's an opportunity to work hard now and put in place some. And we don't want regulations that are onerous. We want common sense regulations that are that strive for best practice.
Peter, just to
within
throw
the
that,
industry.
oh, sorry, mate.
You're right.
Yeah, if I can, Mr. Hill, sorry. To throw that around, just to give you, a picture where we are. When times are good, we never hear from you. We know that, and whether it's you, whether it's bees, whether it's grass-fed grain, grass-fed cattle, whether it's dairy or whatever, and it's a common thread, because when times are good, your industry, not mine, is not sitting there thinking, well, what do we do when it's not so good? And unfortunately, you're always chasing your tail. But I just want to throw this around for some conversation and some thought. And, there's been a number of suggestions put to us. We've heard earlier, the industry is on its, well, the growers are on their knees here in the region. But we also, while we're talking about voluntary codes of conduct, and this is just the world according to Glenn Still, no one else. So I'm not speaking for the committee or the government. When we're talking voluntary codes, number one, they've been diddly squat. But when you get a number of entities, and I'm not running protection rackets for anyone, but if you get those who enter into the code of conduct, unless all the rest are in it, it's just open slather, which you've already touched on before. And I absolutely get that. And I think you said, Mr. Derrico, it's either all in or out. I think you were saying, was it you? Someone said it's either a mandatory or no code. Yeah. And so I just want to open that up, but can I just say, at the end of the day, and we've done this in the road transport industry, because the top of the supply chain is the economic employer. The top of the supply chain is the one that controls what goes on down here. And you guys, if I may dare say, you're no different than my mob out there on the road. You're all price takers. And unfortunately, while the industry, if I can say, is fragmented or split, or you're not all as one, it does make it damn difficult. I just wanted to throw that open, and please, guys, we need some suggestions and we can formulate some recommendations, but we can't make this up. We have to hear it from you guys. So what do you actually want? Ponder that. If anyone wants to chuck two bolts worth in, please do.
Just quickly, continuing on, I guess when we said things were all rosy in the good times, guess what we did? We planted more bloody grapes. China was paying, $700 a tonne back to a grower. We planted more red grapes. So inside a code, if the winery gives a contract to plant grapes, there's got to be some sort of minimum price. Yep, okay, I'm going to plant. The minimum price is $300, for instance. Yep, I'm happy to plant. But if there's no price there, I guess you're just living on hope. And we've all seen it before. So I think potentially inside a code, there could well be some sort of pricing mechanisms that can give assurances for growers into the future. And maybe there's some sort of vineyard register, I don't know, but there's got to be, I think the government is preparing to understand how many hectares we've got in this country, but at the moment I don't think we know. So, that seems to be fundamental. We should know. We've got to match supply with demand, and at the moment we've got too much supply and not enough demand. So guess what? We're getting crap prices.
Yeah, and we've heard evidence to the contrary where some people don't want minimum prices and all that sort of stuff. But can I just think that I know what we've done somewhere else recently in terms of, not setting prices, but setting minimum standards. So what that meant is there's a body that says if you're not getting a minimum standard, i.e. paid on time, or absolutely screwed, no lawyers are allowed, but you have the ability to go there through the Fair Work Commission and go, this is for owner drivers, this is self-employed owner drivers, that you can say, well, that's not fair, so you'll cop a penalty if you don't fix it. Give you something to think about?
Yeah, in terms, it's a code of behaviour in terms of everyone
enforceable by law,
and it's probably one of the downfalls so far of the current code is the retribution, and what's the penalty for not complying to the code? It's a toothless tiger, yeah. So it really kind of defeats, and only the people who are, or the players or the wineries who are good players are happy to sign up to it. The rogues are going to continue to be the rogues.
That's right.
And while there's no penalty on either not being on the code or not doing something right within the code, it's to us a little bit sad but pointless. But it'd be nice to have a set of rules, a set of behaviours that all wineries can comply to, and growers, because it's two-way.
Yeah.
So growers have to conform.
My experience, and my colleagues can talk for themselves, is that the majority of people who enter into the codes want to do the right thing.
Yep.
Now, things may change over the years, but that's, they're trying to do the right thing to start with, but then getting undermined by the ratbags. So anyway, questions?
Yep.
Senator Pocock.
Thanks so much for being here and bringing all of your experience to us in the Senate. Really, really appreciate it. As I've heard, there is broad support for a code that's meaningfully enforced, that, if I hear it correct, keeps rogues held to a standard in relation to pricing and payment systems. Can you just explain the payment system that you're supportive of, the regime? I think you said 50% 30 days and then another 50% by 30th of June in the year of vintage. Is that what you are advocating, Mr. Papagiorgio?
I support that because it gives the grower an opportunity to have a bit of cash flow within 30 days to receive the 50%, and then by end of June to have the other 50%. Actually, our input cost was in that financial year. So why shouldn't we get paid in that financial year? Because under the legislation in South Australia, wineries can only pay one third within 30 days, the other third in June, and the balance in September. But when you supply a private winery, you have to declare your September payment in June. I mean, I present you figures there in my time during the 50 years of grape growing and 21 years in the Riverland wine. Riverland is not the Riverland that I came. Riverland is better than what it is. So I call on the industry and members of Parliament, the government of the day, to sit down with the industry and find a solution. This is unacceptable. We cannot sustain this sort of low prices, 150 or 200, whatever it is. If I supply, you'll notice in my document there, back in 21, when we were getting the $500 a tonne, I had a turnover and income of 354,000. Last year was down to 105. You're never going to survive. It doesn't matter how good you are, what sort of experience you have, what type of operator is. I have adopted from day one, I need to have a good working relationship with the wineries, because I need them, they need me. They need to have Jack Papagiorgio growing good quality grapes so they can turn it into good quality wine to market it, because 50% of our wine goes for export and 50% goes domestic. So we've got to make sure we work with our wineries. And look, if you have a good working relationship and you approach them in a constructive manner, you will work with them and they will work with you. But if you have this arrogant attitude, you're not going to get far. I mean, I can say that quite open. I had some wine this year. I lost my son in 2016. You know what the wine he did? Paid the grapes within 30 days. And he did it for 2 years. He recognised my position and he said, how can I help? To the Senate now, I'm asking you, how are you going to help me? And how are you going to help my fellow growers? That's why I'm here, because when I leave from here, I've got to go back to my wife. She pulled $150,000 out of the super to support the farm. What am I going to tell her?
Thank you, Mr. Papagiorgio. I think you're describing the personal relationships which can be helpful in a time of loss, and the impact on other people in your family and their income and savings when things are totally, the wheels have fallen off. So thank you for that very important evidence. I'm wondering whether you or anyone would like to make further comment around other ways in which you'd like to see the code improved. It sounds like you see real deficiencies in the code as it operates. Are there other things you would like to see in it? Mr. Frasco.
Well, instead of having the wineries come out at the start of December for pricing, I'm pretty sure they could come out, say, November, start of November. It gives us a little bit more time.
We've heard May earlier on. Come out.
I'm
sorry.
Oh, May will be great, but
You mean for the price?
I mean pricing.
Oh, sorry.
Just when they come out with their indicative price, it's normally now in December, which we've only got a couple of weeks, 3 weeks to try and work out if that price is good enough, or you got to go try and find another price. And over the Christmas holidays, you can't get no one because everyone's off. So if you came in a month earlier, start of November, all right, it's not going to solve the problem, but at least gives us a bit more time to work out where we can go if we want to go somewhere else.
Or if it has to go to a dispute resolution at some point, it gives it time. Over the Christmas period, the wineries are all going to be on break. We're all at work doing water. The time is not quite the right timing to be negotiating prices over Christmas, and only 28 days before harvest, sometimes less. So anything that goes into a new code would need to be, it needs to be dealt with swiftly on that pricing mechanism. Like if it's got to go through court, it's going to be a no-brainer because the time frame won't work. The price has to be agreed to and set, 10 days before you pick the grapes. At this point, things are just a little bit squashed. So for a new code, I think maybe if they do bring the date of release back for the prices, that'll give some room for that to happen. But there needs to be an arbitration set up where it can happen very fast, and there needs to be someone appointed that can deal with it straight away.
And presumably, Mr. Farnsworth, not only the timeliness of that kind of arbitration or negotiation can occur, but also that there are some penalties if you walk away or don't honour an agreement that's been made. Is that also important?
Well, it would be important. I'm sure if, with most growers having contracts, there would be legal ramifications in there. I'm sure a grower wouldn't want to jeopardise losing his contract to his winery, so it's easier if you can work out some sort of a resolution before it gets to the point where you walk away. And if the winery wanted to throw the book at you, I'm sure the contract would stand at some point, but it would need to be in the code as well. It needs to be doubled up, I'm sure.
We've had evidence in submissions and here about growers feeling intimidated in terms of dealing with some big players on the other side of the table. Does anyone want to make any comments on that out of your experience? Mr. Derrico.
Only yesterday I was dealing with a grower that was saying they had to accept their winery's offer in contract by 5 p.m. yesterday. Obviously prices were released broadly within the industry yesterday, and the pressure was on that grower to accept the prices, otherwise today the prices would drop. So that sort of stuff. I think generally speaking, in the difficult conditions that the industry has at the moment, growers feel intimidated just to take the offer that's on the table, because they might not be able to sell their fruit because another grower will always accept that offer. Look, just generally, over the time, I think we've seen plenty of growers either not take up an issue through the code for the fear of retribution, and they might have a year or two to run on their contract, and it'll be, well, I won't create any waves because when my contract needs to be renewed, I might get a look in. So that's the type of thing that can happen. The other things, if I just go back to the question beforehand, was what else are we looking for out of the code? Well, that the improved pricing announcements. Now, I've said for some period of time now that there's not a winery that deals with a bank or that's a public listed company that wouldn't know their price come the 30th of June, because you've got to have a budget, and within that budget you're going to have your grape price for the following vintage. fair enough, things might happen around the world that change that. But then, if you can amend your price, you know, whether it's end of August, end of October, say, listen, the price needs to be amended because of this reason. That's all transparent. But at the moment, just to wait until the second Wednesday in December, as we put in our submission, invariably one of the large wineries comes out first and everyone else falls in behind. So that's one issue there. The other side of it as well is the improved payment terms. Now, some of the larger wineries have improved their payment terms significantly, but generally, to think that you've got to wait 180 days to get your final payment, growers that I speak to say, listen, I could live with that if everybody else in the supply chain was on the same terms. And most other suppliers to wineries would suggest that it's 30 days to 60-day payment terms, but a grower is the one that has to wait for an extended payment.
Can I just follow that? No, you do. Just you want to go first?
Yeah,
Chair's prerogative.
No, I'll let you come back. No, but I just want to say there was another Senate inquiry this year into the power of the supermarkets. Okay, and for this committee, for as long as all of us have been on this committee, have known that farmers and growers and producers live in fear of the retribution that could come back from the top of the supply chain. But at that supermarket inquiry, the same thing came out where we got commitments from Coles, Woolworths and Bunnings to meet with their suppliers, and no one would be prosecuted. And it would be lovely if we could get the same questions asked of our winemakers too. And that's not setting the winemakers up for a smack in the nose, it's actually to hear from them, because I don't think any corporation on the public record would not want to be part of that, dealing with their suppliers. Just wanted to throw that
I think
out.
it'd be fair to say that if there was a mandatory code, unless there's a code between wineries and the supermarkets, well, wineries will be stuffed. Yeah.
Sure.
We heard earlier today from Ms Demas about how knowing your pricing earlier will affect your decisions as producers. Can you say a little more about that? Because when you get your price right at the end, when it's all, you know, you've applied all your fertilisers and inputs and pruned in a certain way, I don't know anything about it, but I imagine it would affect your decisions if you knew that price information earlier.
Generally, here in the Riverland, we normally start pruning the first week, second week in June. If you talk to some winemakers, I can actually give you the price in June, July, because they run a business. They're professional people. They've got markets, and they are fully aware where the market is and the prices. So there is position for them to announce some prices in June, July, because that will give us an indication before we start putting investment and our capital costs in the vineyards to manage, and it would start from pruning. We've got to find ways to reduce the costs, but we need some good, strong indications where we're going with all this. We can't, as grape growers, sit back, do all this expenditure, do the right thing. We have to do this year, we do accreditation, sustainability, and guess what? Not $1 extra to the grower, but it cost me $2,500. So what value is this to me?
I agree and disagree. You know the season that you just come off and where the price is sat, and if the industry's not getting any better, you can't really say the winery's going to say, I'm going to pay an extra $100 next year. You got to have a rough idea what's going on, and no one's telling you to grow what you grow. You grow it because it's your business and you choose to. And if you know there's patches and varieties that aren't going so well, you could make a decision if you don't want them or don't want them. Because if we're not profitable, if wineries aren't profitable, we're not going to be profitable, and no one's going to win.
Yeah.
And them coming out say July, you might get $250 a tonne. Then what's to say when that comes in December, it's only 150 because the market's changed, and what happens there? It's a hard thing to try and work out. You got to have an understanding of your business and what you can and can't do.
There's also a big difference, isn't there, to having no transparency or explanation about what happens between 250 and 150. I hear you saying you would like to have clarity and reasoning behind the changes, for example, in pricing the book, rather than waiting till the second week in December to get anything.
Well, yeah, they could start June, and how you go through it come August, something happened worldwide and we can't take your fruit, or it's going to be dropped by $100. They can probably do that, but who knows? Yeah.
It's probably impossible to predict that far out, honestly, to be accurate. Because what if the winery did come out and say to a grower, well, it's going to be $300? It costs about $300 a tonne to grow. So he goes, well, I'll keep my asset alive and grow it. And then it comes out at $250 and he's lost $50 a tonne. I don't think you could put that pressure on the wineries to actually call it that early. I just don't think.
Even if you could, just as a matter of interest, in July, you're pruning in June, July, what would you do? Would you just, if it was not commercial for you to have that vintage that year, would you just severely prune, or what would you do to?
There's multiple options in terms of whether you continue to grow the crop or whether you put it to rest. There are sort of temporary mechanisms to be able to not produce a crop for a year or two. Pruning hard. Some choose not to prune at all. There's chemical means of removing the crop, which reduces the demand of fertiliser and water. So there are options. But obviously the biggest thing is, if you've got some sort of indication of price, you can set a budget. You've got a line in the sand, you can work towards that, whether you're going to give it a 5-star fertiliser program or a 1-star fertiliser program, whether you're going to, how much water you're going to apply. So there's obviously, the more information you've got, the more power you've got to try and stay afloat.
Yeah.
Rather than at June or even earlier, I would suggest May. You're trying to guess what's going to be happening now. Prices were released yesterday. We've probably incurred 2/3 of our costs for the year to that point, with just guessing what it's going to be. Now that's part of agricultural risk. That's farming. We get that, but being a partner in a supply chain in a very complex chain, it'd be nice to have a little bit more transparency about where the expectation might be and how we can manage ourselves, and they can help us and we can help them, if that makes sense.
Mr. Jericho, did you want to add?
The things I'd add in as well, that not all growers, well, there's different sizes and all that obviously, but there are plenty of growers who don't have a contract. But all these guys here, some have probably got contracts and some haven't. Some might have minimum prices in those contracts. So that's just another complicating factor. All those growers who don't have contracts for their fruit are at the mercy of the wineries when those prices are announced. And the other thing, as I alluded to earlier, where perhaps one winery will come out first and others follow in behind, if there was a mechanism where all of those prices that wineries were going to pay were sent to an independent body, and then all the prices were released on the same day, or if all the wineries had to turn up in a room and do a PowerPoint presentation and say that's it. But just to take out that one, I'll loosely call it price signalling.
Yeah,
there's got to be a mechanism to provide some clarity.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Senator Ruston.
Thanks. I'm just keen to understand, obviously the transparency of the pricing mechanism and also the early indication of pricing seems to be the thing that everyone's been, quite have said is sort of like the most important thing to come out of this. How important is that in comparison? So, for instance, does anybody here believe that minimum pricing is something that should be considered?
I might start because I'm not a grower. All right. Well, ideally that'd be fantastic. All I would say is if everyone had a minimum price, if we thought there's an oversupply now, and that minimum price was somewhere near cost of production, we'll have a massive oversupply because you couldn't lose money.
Yep, thanks.
So now off to these guys that actually grow grapes.
You've just sort of contradicted yourself by saying that'd be fantastic, but we're going to get an oversupply.
If you're a grower, that'd be
terrible.
fantastic.
Okay,
so you'll have an oversupply.
Yeah. Or maybe you can ask another question then. On the back of that, are there risks to growers of a mandatory code and putting mandatory requirements in place? Profi?
I think there are some risks, particularly, pricing for one. the trouble with asking wineries, or forcing wineries to come out with their pricing early, by default means that they'll put forward the lowest possible price they can, and then that kind of sets off the market for the next 12 months, or and up until the vintage. So, as a grower, I've never felt the need to hear my wineries pricing, in May or even earlier, simply because I have a reasonable understanding of the market, and so there's no great surprises with the market. So I think if we start sort of regulating wineries to put out that pricing, I think there's actually a very real possibility that can actually have a negative impact. The real life example of that is the grape payment terms in South Australia. They're legislated at, the final payment 30 September. So that's legislated as a minimum, and then it becomes the standard. So there's a real risk there. We've sort of got to put our economist hat on and think, well, how is the market going to respond to this? Which then, sort of thinking about the code of conduct more broadly, if the code of conduct becomes too onerous, and when I say onerous, I mean probably costly for wineries, if it's difficult for them to deal with small growers because they're off to arbitration, or because of the pricing, or some of the other issues that could find their way into a code of conduct, you can actually find that wineries will actually start to walk away from contracts and seek to secure their supply through more bulk wine acquisitions, which means more growers have to become bulk wine producers. And I'm not sure that there's a lot of growers here that actually want to move themselves further along the supply chain and take all that risk of not only being a grower but also being a wine producer. So there's a lot of risk with all this stuff. There's absolutely no doubt about that.
It's certainly in the commercial part of the wine industry.
I think that's what we're really talking about.
It is, yeah.
So I'm interested, because it seems to me, like from the conversations we've had so far today, that the grape growers are price takers, but so are the wineries in a large sense, because they're playing in a global marketplace that's dictating to them what they can actually charge. And of course, we know that input costs have gone through the roof. I'm sure they've gone through the roof for you guys, and similarly they've gone through the roof at the manufacturing point. So I'm keen to understand what you think would be a catalyst that would be able to be put in place by government, or what government could do to support an industry-wide response to what appears to be a symptom of an international oversupply of wine, most particularly an international oversupply of red wine. Is there something that you can see? Because it strikes me as putting a mandatory code in place is not necessarily going to be answering the big picture problem, and that is we simply got too much wine in tank and not enough markets to sell it in.
That's not, the mandatory code is not going to be the silver bullet.
Yeah.
Maybe not grants to get out of grown wine grapes, maybe incentives to say let's try a different crop. But then if something's going well there, then it's going to be an oversupply in a few years' time because everyone goes into it. It's a hard thing to do, but people just got to look at their own business, and unfortunately, just got to make their own mind up. Can you still survive at this climate, these prices, and survive? But it would be good if government did come in and say, right, let's take a lot of this wine's excess stock and just turn it into ethanol, clean a few of these tanks up.
Everyone driving around in grape cars.
And like I said, the mandatory code is not going to be the silver bullet, but it's not going to fix the issue. Yeah, something else needs to be put out there to help get people going into a different direction.
I suppose in answering that question, I'd go back to maybe April last year, March last year. Australian Grape and Wine Incorporated put in a pre-budget submission for assistance, $86 million, and the industry has received, I think, $3.5 million. Again, it seems that plenty of other industries have had some sort of assistance, but the wine industry hasn't been so fortunate. So we can sit here and sort of come up with a few little ideas, but we've got to take, you know, what Australian Grape and Wine put forward and really try and support that, because they're our peak industry body. They do a great job. Put a lot of work, time and effort into the pre-budget submission, and just to have it, you know, from my part, seemed like it's been ignored was an insult.
So, to that end, you're suggesting that a concerted effort in terms of international marketing and promotion could be the catalyst to moving the oversupply, which would re-equalise the market in Australia. So you're not suggesting that there's too many grapes in the ground at the moment. You're actually thinking that we just need a bit of extra help to try and come over this sort of excess hump.
Yeah, with the surplus wine that's out there, and some of it's probably aged a fair bit, somehow that needs to be eradicated from the system. Now, whether that's export stimulus, whether that's finding a way to dispose of it, whether it's methanol, whatever it might be, there just needs to be a mechanism or some intervention to help the industry through the dramas we've got at the moment.
Yeah, we'll certainly be asking Accolade and Treasury in a minute whether they think that they can market our way out of this wine.
Rustin, I think unfortunately in the Riverland we've got a larger area of wine grapes. The Murray Valley is actually quite diversified. There's, I'm not sure exact numbers, but very much more diversified in crops than what we are in this region. We've got a significant amount of wine grapes and a significant amount of red wine grapes, and that's why growers are, you know, we've heard from growers today, everyone's hurting, and the government's not reacting quick enough. Like, they're talking, yeah, we'll transition to this, transition to that. No one's got money to do that. So they're talking all the right stuff, but growers need money to transition into citrus or table grapes or stone fruit, get out of some red wine grapes, marry up supply and demand again, but there's government's just not reacting quick enough.
So to that end, I mean, I asked the councils earlier this morning, is anybody actually put anything together in order to actually come up with what is a proposal? Because, I mean, it's all well and good to talk about transition out or do whatever. You actually need to understand what that looks like. What are you transitioning to? How are you transitioning? Who's funding the transition? What's the timing? Is anybody doing that work?
The IPRSA is doing that work, but it's so slow. So we've actually, self and Jack spoke to some IPRSA people yesterday, and you know they're great at listening, but there's nothing available. But there is these RIC loans, and it came up earlier on about these RIC loans, which are, it's a $2 million loan to an agricultural business to expand or diversify or get out of wine grapes or do all sorts of things. But it's so onerous to qualify, and it's just about impossible to qualify. So that needs to be looked at and freed up. I think that was something that Barnaby Joyce put in place, those RIC loans. But unfortunately it's not being...
Thanks, Chair. I know we're running out of time.
Thanks, Chair. Just before we finish, just wanted to clarify a couple of things. The second Wednesday of December date, is that a mandated date in any shape or form, or is that like just a convention?
It's in the voluntary code.
In the what sort?
In the voluntary
In the
code.
voluntary code. Okay, all right. So it's only.
Sorry, yeah. So the second Wednesday in December is the date for announcements. As I was saying earlier, one might come out earlier, and most of the others will come out on the 12th. That's if you're a contracted grower. So those who are uncontracted, they get their price when they get their price.
Righto. Okay. We've heard a couple of different ways of this pricing to be described. Like the big guys go first, and then the others sit back and wait. And then generally their offers are lower than what might get put up by someone like Accolade. And that's a form of price fixing essentially, because you know we're relying on the prices of one or two big players and then falling behind it. We also heard I mentioned the word collusion mentioned earlier, which I'm not sure about the context of that. We didn't get to check on that. Have you got any thoughts about, you've received your prices now, can you share with us any thoughts about what those prices were set on? Did you get any information from your wineries
as to why the prices were set at those levels, or is it just the price that you provided?
It's just the price, but the problem is, majority of the majors, your Treasuries, your Accolade, your Pernos, they all sell in bottle.
Yeah.
They're not in the bulk market.
Yeah.
But the prices that we get is bulk market price.
That's based on the wholesale price?
Yeah.
Okay.
So whatever the bulk market price is going for is
Yeah.
50, 60, 70 cents worldwide. That's what they're basing our prices on. Yet they're not in the bulk market.
Yeah.
They're in the bottle market. And the bottle market's not that like that. But that's how they justify their price to us.
Yeah.
The bulk market's doing this, so...
Yes, no, I had this discussion with someone yesterday. That was exactly the point I was making. After the wholesale market, there's a whole different range of things down the supply chain to grow your margins around your brand and your distribution networks and a whole range of things. But yeah, I was interested, do you know if the spot price, that wholesale price, moves at all prior to these the release on the second Wednesday of December? Because surely it's got to be based on that wholesale price, because a winery could just go and buy wholesale wine on the market at that set price.
The world wants Australian product, so for some reason the Australian product's getting a lower price than any other one in the world.
Right.
I don't know why. We grow the grapes, they market it, they sell it. We don't really look that hard into it. But for some reason, yeah.
Do you know what the wholesale price for Shiraz is at the moment? Like the spot price? Spot market
It's
price?
come up from where it was. I'm not too sure.
60 cents.
65 cents a litre. Okay.
Bulk wine.
Yeah, that's the bulk.
It's all in the Shiraz reports that come out every month.
Yeah.
And
Right.
people can monitor that very easily.
Okay. And then, so how many litres in a tonne? I've just got it, is it 1,000 or?
700.
700, okay. All right, I'll work that out. Yeah, so just in relation to, just my last question is, unfortunately we're running out of time. You mentioned a mandatory code's not a silver bullet for fixing your problems, but could you put it the other way? Could it be kind of kryptonite instead of a silver bullet to those who want the industry to rationalise and want to see small players exit the industry, don't want to see any kind of impediments to this rationalisation over time? Do you think that's a reasonable? Do you think there's that attitude out there in the broader industry, especially the winemaking industry?
I'm not sure.
No?
Through this difficult time, not every grape grower is going to survive this.
Yeah.
So the industry and government need to work out a package that those growers, whatever it's 5, 10%, whatever the percentage, don't want to do this anymore. They've been doing it for 30, 40, 50 years. They cannot find a way out of this. So here's an opportunity for the industry and government to negotiate a package. Government wants to buy back water for the environment. This grower here, those growers there, they want to live the industry. Let them live with some dignity. They can stay on their farm, still contribute to the local economy. Let's just simply stop growing grapes because of their size, the age, you name it. So that's one way you can assist those growers to live the industry. But for me, some other important things, we don't have an independent. Who determines how much wine stock there is? National registration of vineyards. Why are we not supporting it?
Yeah.
I hear some wines are not supporting the national registration of vineyards. We all should be supporting national vineyards. We have to know exactly what's in the ground so we know what we're marketing, what are we facing. And the other thing is, on Wine Australia, that I know, there's no grower board member of that board.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll certainly be asking them about that. Yeah.
I did have asked that question, and I was told that Taylor Wines is a grower. I mean, I enjoy Taylor's wine because I think it's pretty good wine.
Yeah.
But in all due respect, he's a winemaker. They need Jack Giorgio on Wine Australia because he will represent Australian grape grower.
What are the implications of not having growers on that board? Sorry, last question.
Sorry?
What is that? What happens as a consequence of not having a strong enough growers' voice on that board?
Well, in any industry, you've got to have a primary producer on the board so you can contribute, so you can understand what's happening beyond the farm gate, regardless of what you produce. And I take interest beyond the farm gate. I want to know who's making a decision on my behalf. And I'll challenge their decision. Because if I don't get the answer, Jack will be back.
Just before we finish, just as a matter of interest, have any of you, in terms of your contracts over the years, had to bring in a third-party independent negotiator or facilitator?
Not going to.
Not going to. Okay, but you
Directly with the winery.
I've done it once. I've used the code and done a dispute.
Yeah.
And they just brought in an arbitrator. He made a decision, and we both.
and everybody abided by it.
Yep.
Okay.
No prejudice.
Just on that, with growers in our region, in Murray Valley, they would generally make contact with me first, and then I would put a phone call in, and it doesn't necessarily get to the code. We encourage people to come together and sort their problems out.
So you would represent them because there would be concern or fear about them openly saying this to someone buying their grapes? Or?
No, in those cases, the winery knows precisely who it is, but we haven't taken it outside the district and made a lot of noise about it where there could be negative publicity.
Yeah.
So
try and deal with
we
it
can create enough negative publicity in the region, but we just get together and sort it out, and most of the times that happens.
Okay. Yes, sorry, please, Henry.
Yeah, sorry. I just it is worth, I guess, just pointing out that this process is about sort of looking at the code, which hope to inform contracts and contract negotiations and discussions around that. And yet, so many contracts in this industry exist without any mention of price.
Any mention of?
Any mention of price.
Yeah.
It seems a very perverse system to me that when you enter a long-term contract, that it doesn't tell you what the price is or how the price will be determined, or perhaps a minimum price. And I think that the industry and growers have been very poorly served by price not being a key feature of a contract. It's an afterthought, which is ridiculous.
Well, certainly the economic drivers at the ACCC agree with you on that. They seem to think it's a key element that's missing. We'd love to spend more time with you, and thank you so much for coming in, but we've really got to move on. So I appreciate your evidence, and I don't think there was any questions taken on notice. But